We're writing a book, and the question we keep getting is, why now? We have done so many keynotes on the topic of workplace culture, engagement, and belonging. We've been guests on many podcasts. So why stop and write a book, and why this moment? Well, it's 2026, and right now there's this quiet assumption floating around that we just need to wait this moment out, ride out the current climate after this administration, and then go right back to doing what we were doing before, the culture work, the engagement work, inclusion, belonging, what many people often shorten to just DEI. But that gave us pause, because it didn't work the way we wanted to the first time. And the fact that it came apart so easily, almost overnight, that told us that the foundation was never really built. So we didn't want to write a book about going back. We wanted to write one about going forward, about what we should actually be doing differently this time. I'm Pam Jeffords, and along with Dr. Patrice Palmer, this is The Trust Gap, a new model for engagement, belonging, and performance, and the podcast that walks through it with you, chapter by chapter, as this book comes to life. Here's the heart of it. For too long, we mistook what was common practices for what was best practices. We repeated practices that were never actually proven to work. We put a label on them and called it progress. And underneath all of it, the thing we never really fixed was trust. Because trust has eroded just about everywhere. According to Edelman's Trust Barometer, trust has shifted away from the press, religious organizations, NGOs, and politicians. And we're now at a place where people are more likely to trust people just like them and those closest to them, their neighbors, their colleagues, their CEOs. We no longer trust the institutions we used to lean on, and now we're laying on AI on top of that. And so when trust fractures, it stops being a personal problem and it becomes a professional one. It becomes the things that quietly decides whether any of the rest of it, the culture, the engagement, the belonging, actually holds. So across this series, we're going to do a few things. We'll talk about why we decided to write the book, why now, and we'll name what went wrong, honestly, without flinching. We'll talk about fear and the good programs that fear quietly killed, and then we'll get practical. Because the whole point of this book is the playbook that comes with it. What do we actually do? What can we measure? And what does it look like when it's working? The pendulum will swing back, it always does. And this time we want to be ready, not with more of the old playbook, but with something built, this time with you in mind. Welcome to The Trust Gap. Patrice, I'm excited to be here with you today as we launch the first in a series of podcasts that will be covering our new book coming out called The Trust Gap, which is a new model for engagement, belonging, and performance. I've been asked a lot, why are you writing a book? You've had a lot to say for a long time, Pam. You certainly haven't ever been quiet about this. So why now? What's going on in this moment that the book is the right next step? And for me, it's really, there's two things. One, I've got a milestone 60th birthday coming up. It's my next birthday. But also importantly, what I've been hearing as people are talking about culture and inclusion and belonging, there's this notion that once this current administration, and we're here in the year of 2026, once this current administration is gone, then we'll go back to doing all the work that we were doing before. And it kind of made me pause to say, wait a second, it didn't work the way we wanted it to work before. And evidence by that is how easily it was dismantled once this administration came in. So I wanted to get a book out there that says, what should we be doing? And it's not going back and doing the old common practices that didn't actually rise any boats, much less all boats, but really get out there. What should we be doing? How do we set up for success? Because the pendulum will swing back, as we all know. It swung one way, it's swinging back. And we want to be ready with what do we do when that pendulum hits this emphasis back on culture and inclusion and belonging. But Patrice, I dragged you along in this. Why are you excited about the book?
So I'm really excited about what it really means in the consistency. In the same ways that you said, that pendulum is going to come back. But then once it comes back, now what? There are folks that are in different camps that it worked absolutely the way it was supposed to. There are other people in a camp that was like, no, it absolutely did not. I think we're in a camp that really showcases that it did not work exactly the way that it should have worked because all the pieces were not in the correct place. And now we can see what happens when all of these things are not lined up. And really now it's I think it's more effective for us to really have a playbook. And so I'm excited about the playbook that's going to come out of this because that's going to give us the consistency. It's going to give us the efficiency. And it's going to give us alignment in the ways that we really need so that we know how to do this step by step. And we can measure when things are not on point the way that they need to. I think that was something that was really missing at the beginning of this is the metrics. How are we measuring our success? I think it really builds in what that gap is, the gap that we have in trust. It's not in one place, it's eroded everywhere. People don't trust their colleagues. They're not trusting their managers. They're not trusting the CEO. We're not trusting AI. Nobody's trusting anything right now, right? And so, because of that, that trust is not just a personal issue, it's a professional need at this point. And I think that's what I would love to be able to bring, is how do we have that conversation? How do we now create steps and processes and systems that work in ways that they are meant to work for the greater good, not just for the select few, but for the greater good? I think that's where we are in this process right now. And I know we got a lot of things cooking, but right now, what's really boiling to the surface is we got to talk about it. We have to talk about it, and we do it in podcast form. We like to do all kind of different modalities, and we really want to get to that person that's not only living this experience, but also the one who's making the decisions about how do we do this work better. And I could not have partnered with a better person to do this. And I think between the two of us, this is going to be a rocking book.
And we share a lot of things in common about our approach, but one that we really latch onto is the need to measure it.
Yeah.
And when you look back at how much time are we planning to spend on the book in terms of what went wrong, that's probably the biggest criticism I've gotten as I start to socialize the book and some of the excerpts from the book is, don't focus too much on what went wrong, Pam. Just tell us what to do, right? I just want you to tell me what to do. We trust you. We'll do it. But I do think we have to spend a teeny bit of time on what went wrong, because it does build trust, right? To tell people, hey, listen, we acknowledge this didn't work. But also, if we don't say what went wrong, then people are going to repeat those again, because we often confuse what I call common practices with best practices. And in the world of culture and DEI and employee engagement, we use common practices all the time and just stick a label and say, well, 80% of companies do this. And that all of a sudden became a best practice, even though no one stopped and said, well, did it work? So everything that we're going to talk about can be measured. And we love measuring trust. And I love Edelman's Trust Barometer. It's been just something I look forward to every year to see where trust is lying within the workplace. But also, you can track engagement scores. So we've been tracking engagement around the world for workplace engagement for years. And according to Gallup, that dropped now to 21% of employees are engaged now. That's been declining for 2 years. And so when you take this trust, which is on very shaky grounds, as you mentioned, for a lot of reasons, and then you have this low employee engagement, and then we layered on DEI on top of that. It's like the infrastructure is not built. And so as we look about, what is next, it's really around that trust and engagement, because that has to be the foundation of anything else you build on. And again, you can measure them. So we love that. And so as you look at trust, I've said for years now, any of my clients that have worked with me, I've been saying since well before 2019 that we've been seeing that trust has shifted from things like religious organizations, political organizations, the media, NGOs, to the workplace, and specifically your CEO and your colleagues. And as you mentioned, when that becomes fractured, which right now we're seeing, then people are left really sad, because who are you going to trust if you can't turn to the person next to you and trust them, or your CEO and trust them? So I do think that's where people need to spend the bulk of their time, is building that foundation for trust so you can layer other things on top of it.
I love that we're talking about it in that framework. I think our honesty is sometimes where people are just like, yeah, why do you got to keep talking about it? But I think that's an honest approach to be able to acknowledge that everybody did not have the same experience, right? So there are some people who are like, no, you need to tell us what happened, because we're using that as their own measuring stick of your consistency and your continuity in what we're talking about. And a lot of times people are just like, yeah, we already know that that's bad. Let's not talk about it. Yeah, when you don't talk about it and you don't actually have a label for it, you have a tendency to regurgitate it back into the work that you're already doing, and you give what you think is a different output, when in fact, bad data in gets bad data out. So you're not talking about a particular reasoning for why trust is being eroded and why we have this kind of chasm between how people are trusting their work and their workplace and their colleagues and things like that. You don't ever address that part of it. That's still bad data that's going in. We're just going to kind of leave this piece out. We're only going to talk about the good. Like, no, that's not how you heal. Healing has to do with being able to acknowledge what went wrong. And if we want to, go into the weeds about it, I think that's one of the reasons why we're in the mess that we are, because there are very powerful industries that don't want to acknowledge whatever happened. And that's the first thing. That's the human piece of it. Like, you messed up. Let's acknowledge that. Not every piece of it was messed up. Not everything messing up is not necessarily equating to everything being wrong. If you say that we messed up, then you're saying that what we did ultimately was wrong. Like, no, it was misinformed. We just didn't have all the information. We have better information. We can make better decisions now. And I think that's what happened in a lot of points around DEI. There were issues that we didn't know in totality. There were things that people let slide that absolutely shouldn't have let slide. And there were things that were just becoming common occurrences when they should not necessarily have been. And it wasn't being measured properly. And if I have learned anything from years of schooling, teaching, and working with you and working in B labs, if it's not written, it does not exist. And so you have to make sure that you are measuring things, that you are writing things down, that you're not just talking about the commonality of things. Like you said, common practices have become best practice, and they have never been proven to be best. They've just been proven to be common. And because of that, we keep repeating those same cycles because that's what everybody has done, and it's technically worked to some extent. And now we're saying, you know what? Let's take a step back, reevaluate what actually is common, what is best, and start putting this into the correct category. And I think that's another thing that this book is going to be able to do. I hope that it helps sort some of these commonalities that people are utilizing and trusting in that really are not what's best for the communities that they're supposed to be serving, nor is it really best for industry and what it means to bring in a new workforce. Because I think that's also something that this is going to be able to talk about is Gen Z. But now we're not only having to work intergenerationally with people, now we have to bring in the artificial intelligence that doesn't have feelings. All that still also has to be somehow brought into this. And we got to learn how to trust all these different systems in ways that are going to be beneficial. So yeah, I think we're going to touch on some things that people have been asking about and some things people haven't even thought about in totality yet.
And to your point, Patrice, it's not about a lack of effort. People have cared very deeply about this work and organizations have invested real time. So we're not trying to discount that or say people weren't making an effort, right? And there were progress in pockets, but not to the scale that we needed to be. And then we didn't acknowledge when the misses occurred. And so I remember one pretty dramatic one about 15 years ago. There was an informal program where one of our business leaders would let rising professionals early in their career come in and just like be a participant in a meeting. And so they were just observing. And sometimes they were introduced, sometimes they weren't, but they would just kind of sit around the back of the room and observe the meeting just so they can understand what does it look like. Because I would love to have seen what a board room looked like and felt like before I actually went into one. And so for the most part, this company was very white. And most of the people that were observing early in career were white. And for the first time, a person of color came into the room as an observer and sat on the outskirts of the table, just like people had done for years before then. And it got turned into HR. And they said this was tokenism, that this person was invited into the meeting and didn't have a role in the meeting. And this was, again, an early professional, young professional person. And then it was like, well, we've done this for years. And they said, yes, but did you put this person here because you wanted to show the client that you had Black representation? And they're like, no, we did it because we've been doing this for years. And so in the end, the program was shut down. And I was in some of the conversations where they said, well, why don't you just create a role for these folks? There's no role for them. They're in there to observe. And again, in my background, I would have loved to observe mini meetings, right? And not felt pressure to participate or have an opinion. I'm just there to say, what is it about? And so that's an example of where it backfired, because then it became, oh, now DEI has taken away a program that really was benefiting a lot of people and could have continued to benefit. But there's others too where we've stopped doing certain work because of the perception of it. And we should have just been honest and gone back and said, let's just name what this program is. And so there's a lot of ways we could have, in the end, rectified that situation. But the decision was made to cut the program.
But this is why we talk about fear, right? We have a whole section that's just talking about mapping out fear. And that is a great example of fear being so heavy in that space that it destroyed something that should have been really a legacy program within this organization. Like, to be able to sit in these rooms to understand why people are making these decisions, to hear how decisions are made, and then for someone to take that perspective or perception of what's going on and to take it, kind of dismantle it. They knew that this was a program that we'd had for years and it served a lot of people, but they more than likely did not have things written down. So there was no structure to it. They more than likely did not have the reasoning why they brought people in, at what levels they brought people in. And so when it comes up against any type of tension, you need to be able to go back to, this is the reasoning behind why we have value in X, Y, and Z. That's how you prove that it actually works. That's how you prove that this is something that is an intentional gift to our junior employees, by giving them this opportunity, and everybody gets the same opportunity in this organization. No one is going to come into this organization and not know what it looks like to be in a leadership space. That's a great tagline, right? To even be able to do that, but wasn't written down, did not have any structure, did not have any true understanding of the totality of why this was a great opportunity for everybody in the organization. And when it came up against scrutiny, it could not stand. And then what's the scapegoat? The scapegoat is DEI did it. The wokeism did it. The liberals did. Like, then you get all the scapegoats that come in, when in fact, the process was not as strong as it needed to be able to face tension. And everything has to be able to do that. That's why we have metrics, to be able to say, well, the reason why I didn't hire this person was because of X, Y, and Z. And I can prove to you this was the process that we took to get to that realization. It's actually a normal thing to have that tension, but our fear does not allow us to map it in a way that's going to be best for everyone involved.
Well, that's why I'm also excited about the trust-centered engagement model, right? Because that's what it's designed to do, is take all of these threads that are out there, taking all the organizational values and put them into specific behaviors and practices that shape that employee experience. And so when you look at trust-centered engagement model, that makes sense to most people, right? And we can track trust and we can track engagement. When we think back to early stages of DEI, it was all built because we wanted employees to trust that their employer was hiring the most qualified people and they were promoting the most qualified people, and that who was leaving the organization was not unfairly impacting certain groups. And so I really feel like this trust-centered engagement model that you're really building out, Patrice, is that thread that's going to take all of these culture programs, inclusion programs, development programs, and put them all into a system.
I love that you brought that into the space again, because I feel like when we talk to people, they want you to fix it. Like, just tell me how to fix it, and then I can move on with the rest of my day. And it's like, it's not really about fixing it. Systems work in the ways that they were built to work. And so if you want it to work, then you have to build a system that gives you the output that you actually want. And so this model, the whole purpose of it is to take all that information and to put it into a model that allows you to have an output that gives you the greatest understanding of the information that's been given to you. It gives you an opportunity to look at trust from all of these different angles in a way that's going to actually move the organization forward as a whole, because our trust goes through a criterion that allows for us to look at all of these different points of entry without kind of getting stuck on one point over another. And it gives us a alignment to move us forward as an organization built on the model that trust is the foundation. We know that respect is in there. We know that belonging is a part of that. We know that inclusion is a part of that. All of these different things, but you don't have to say it to move in that way. And again, it doesn't negate why these words matter, but they change so much. People get stuck on the word. Well, you said this word means this, and so I interpret this as this thing. It's like to get all of the interpretations, misinterpretations out of the model, we're able to create an alignment that allows you to base it on a behavior. This is a behavior, and if you don't exhibit the behavior, no disrespect, but you don't exhibit this behavior that we need. And that is why these different things happen. And then you see folks who have had these 5-year strategies that have all of these different values and all of these different things that they say that they do. But when you ask them, what does success look like in this organization? What behavior do I have to exhibit for you to know that I now am being successful? Now you start getting the ums and ahs, and we got to go talk to Frank and accounting and all these other things so that we can figure out how do you know it actually works? Because that's the human side of it. That's the human side. And it's funny because I think now more than ever, you'll see organizations throwing all these great ideas into Chat GPT and it generates these beautiful words. And you're like, oh, that's cool. Like, yeah, that's our organization. Our organization does this. And the simpleness of it is you come in there and say, okay, great. Now show me the behavior that lets me know that that's how we got to that understanding. Now folks are looking like, what you mean? We just respect each other. What are you talking about? Everyone's just included, everyone's welcome. Show me how you do it. And again, that's the practicality. That's the playbook. And I think that's a part that we are being very intentional about making sure is in this book and in the playbook itself is I'm going to show you how you got to this point. And if you can't follow this and get this same outcome, then more than likely what you're saying, these things are not adding up and you're going to have to change something.
You're right that I've gotten into quite a few arguments with clients. I've even gotten fired by a client for just standing my ground on it. But it is true because when you walk out with these words, even like respect or inclusion or belonging or innovation or any of the words that many companies have out on their value statements, you can't measure those because they're not the behavior underneath it. You have to stop. And sometimes it's hard work. What does respect look like? Because behavior you can observe, right? So respect looks like, do I make eye contact with you? Do I say hello in the morning? Do I listen to you when you're talking, or am I on my phone, or am I distracted? And it's amazing how many people don't want to say good morning anymore, or hello, or things like that are signs of respect. And when I ask clients, without even using any DEI language, do you have a set of behaviors that you want all of your employees to experience? They'll say yes. Great. And you want every employee in your company to experience these behaviors the same? Yes, great. Well, if you find out that a statistically significant population in your workforce is not experiencing these behaviors the same, do you want to address it? And most of them say, yeah, but how big of a population? Statistically, let's say greater than 4%. If there's a population of yours that greater than 2 or 4%, and they're unhappy, whether it's a region or a tenure or a race, ethnicity, a gender, sexual orientation, a department, you pick the demographics. If there's a population that is not experiencing your values the same, do you want to address it? And they'll say, yes. But there's the third one that kind of gets them. I said, will you actively seek out those gaps? So if you can answer those 3 questions, I want all my employees to experience the behaviors the same that align to my values. I want to close gaps when I find out they exist. And I want to actively seek out those gaps. That's when you really have that structure to say, is there really a meritocracy here, right? Are we really listening to all employees? Is everyone in the organization experiencing their development and their skills and the values that we said when they came in here the same? And so I really like this system. I like measuring behaviors because it does allow us to understand the hotspots in the organization. And then it gets away from performative things like bias training or anything like that. It gets to the actual what is happening in your organization.
And I have literally been in meetings with you, and you've run that down, and you've seen as you get to that third one, you want to actively seek out. People around the table are looking at each other like, why do we have to go find it?
Yeah.
You know, you said that this is who you are. You're saying that you want to make sure that all these people are experiencing the same thing, but yet you're not willing to go and seek out if it's actually working. Let's replace that with, do you want everyone to get the same t-shirt? This is a branding opportunity. Will you not actively seek out the different sizes that people are so they can have a shirt that fits? Or do you just want everybody to have one size fits all shirt? It's not going to work, because if the shirt fits, you know that that shirt was intended for that body, right? And people who are outside the organization also know. Everybody is wearing a 4X shirt. It's going to start to look weird. Now, you may have a couple people that fit, and it's like, this is great. I'm so happy that you got me this 4X. I love this size shirt. And you're going to have other people who are like, I wear an extra small. This looks crazy on me. I don't feel comfortable. I can't show up the way that I need to in this. I want to wear the shirt. I just want the one that fits me. And you're actively saying, no, everybody gets a 4X. Grow into it. That's basically what you're telling folks. And so if you give it something even as simple as, this shirt is not fitting, when you give that analogy, people will be like, no, that makes so much sense. That's why we buy clothes. When you get into your education and you start getting robes, those robes at the beginning are kind of one size fits all. You get it tall, you get it short, you can get basically one size fits all. It's not a dress for male or female, nothing. It's just, this is the covering you have on. You get to a master's, they start asking you your height. They start asking you how long your arms are. Is this a male or female cut? Now you get into your doctorate, that is tailored to you. They need to know you all of your proportions, because it is supposed to say something very specific. When you have on this robe was meant for you. You start to see yourself belong in the academy based on the way that your regalia fits you. And if it doesn't fit, people will tell you, hey, that's not fitting you the way it's supposed to. You need to get a size that is supposed to fit you. And it's the exact same thing. If we can go through all that trouble to seek out and make sure that you have on a shirt or a robe that fits, we can do the exact same thing as it relates to the value that your organization says that it has in each and every employee. And I think, again, that's how that trust continues to erode. Those little things, they always build up to something bigger.
I love the analogy around the robes. And it really relates with something you're always talking to us about, which is why this kind of phrase of all are welcome, or this is for everyone, why it falls flat. So can you expand a little bit on that one for me?
I realize how often folks are saying all are welcome. And I recognize that it fell flat because what I've found in those same spaces is that people have learned not to trust these spaces because they actually were not ever built with them in mind. And not building them in mind is continuously and consistently creating a untrustworthy environment. You keep telling me that you're going to do this thing, and it's a big sign on the doors, it's on the walls, it's all a slogan. And then I get there and I need something specifically as accommodation, or I need you to be able to pronounce my name in its proper form. And then people are just like, no, and I'm not about to do that. So when was I going to be welcome? When is my welcome package get in here? When do I get the newsletter that says that, yes, this is true? And so I think that's what people have created. And I, knowing that I've been the first in spaces, the only in spaces, and then have to hear like everyone is welcome. Well, how did it only get to be one of me? If all of us are welcome, it should be dozens of people. I should see myself represented in this space, but I don't. So who is welcomed? Like where did I kind of fall into a trap because other people didn't? So I think that to me was something, and I constantly use that when I'm working with students, that it's definitely great to say that you're welcome, but when I'm creating these initiatives, we're doing the trust engagement, the amount of hours that we have sat and talked to people, the amount of sessions that we've had, focus groups, around how people actually live and experience different things, that is what has built the trust model. That's what we had in mind. It wasn't two or three people that we talked to and we were like, hey, I think this is how we should do it. This is hundreds of thousands of hours between all of us in our partnership, sitting down, talking to people, getting their lived experiences, and then finding out some of us are having the exact same experience. You have two beautiful granddaughters. I think you constantly create spaces for them. And I think this is just another opportunity to be like, I want them to be able to walk into a space and say, not only am I providing this space, but I truly had you in mind when I was talking about this. You, as this little beautiful baby, had you in mind so that when you became this beautiful woman that's now going to walk into these institutions that I've already been in, that I know how it is,
Right.
I want to make sure that there is a space for you. And I'm going to build this so that they know how to treat you. And that, I think, is what makes not only the engagement model what it is, but it also gives us the opportunity to speak truth to power.
Yeah, I love it. And I will let Charlotte and Olivia know you think I'm creating space with them in mind.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll probably have a whole chapter dedicated to how AI can support us in this work. But when you talk about, is it even possible? Let's say you're an organization of 40 or 140,000 people. And in the past, it just wasn't possible to understand, like in an easy way, what everyone wanted. And so you would see these engagement surveys, which again are broken, right? Which come out once a year, ask all these questions, and it would take 6 months to figure out what's going on. And then in 8 months, maybe you hear something, and then they start it all over again. And so there's lack of trust in engagement surveys. But now with AI, and a lot of the engagement survey tools have AI supporting it. If it's leveraged correctly, like real time, you can understand what is on the mind of your people. And we're not talking about just pulse surveys. We're talking about literally the ability to collect and aggregate very validated themes across your workforce. And so I'm real excited about this. Probably what we're asking and where we're recommending people go wasn't possible 5 years ago before we were really leveraging AI the way we are now. And so it's not just that it makes it easier, it actually makes it possible. So I'm real excited about that and where the playbook is how it's going to take people. But I do want to close on saying we talked about why we want to write this book, but I think the most important thing is that when the work starts to really ramp back up again, which you know it is, there's a lot of people out there who want this work to reemerge stronger. It's not about just doing what we were doing before and doing more of it. It's really about we've got to do something different, which was our working title, up until recently was the book was something different because we can't just go back to what we were doing before. But it is at the end of the day, we want to help build a workplace that people can trust. And I think if we add on something else around that people can trust and that really was created with them in mind. And I think those things are really what I'm most excited about the book. But what are you most excited about?
I'm most excited about an opportunity to really dive into data in a more inclusive way. Mm-hmm. I've done too many surveys to count. And a lot of times my lived experience, I'm Black, I'm queer, I'm, non-binary, I wear glasses. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I have, right? And I am constantly aggregated out of the conversation. It's only one of me in a lot of spaces. And so in order to protect me, the intent is to protect and to be able to not have any repercussions happen because I'm telling my truth. My story doesn't get told. And so I don't believe that I'm the only one. I think many people have that. And to be able to provide that opportunity to have that voice to be like, yes, that happened to me, or I'm having the same difficulty. I think that's what makes me excited because I hope to be able to support someone who may share my identities or know of someone who consistently doesn't get their voice heard. I'm looking forward to that. I would say really is a new model of engagement, belonging, and performance. All of these things are working together, and that's what we need. Inclusion has never been exclusive. It is not for one group over another. It's not for one oppressive identity over another. It means you have to tell the story, the whole story, and nothing but the whole story in order for us to have a better understanding of it. You don't get to be written out at the end because you had this one thing that really resonated at the beginning, but maybe not so much anymore. And people are also still a multiplicity of identities. So I may have this dominant identity, but these other pieces of me may not be as dominant and maybe not as spoken for. So I'm also hoping that it provides care and understanding for the folks who are just like, damn, I keep getting kicked out of stuff or not being invited to things, and I want change. I want to make things better also. But it seems like this one thing is not allowing me to walk into these spaces and be seen. And most importantly, I can't be trusted. And so if you can't build the trust in that as well, I think these other things, it continues to just erode it.
I think it is a whole nother episode, though, right? Is to talk about, because most of the time those examples come up when the concept of privilege is being talked about.
Yeah.
And because you have this dominant identity that is considered privilege, but then you have all this other back that you're carrying that isn't, in their opinion, being acknowledged. And so that's real, right? And so I remember sitting in a partner meeting once with an individual and talking about this, and he was clearly not happy with the conversation. And afterwards, I just pulled him aside and said, what's going on? Why is this so upsetting to you? And he said, Pam, I grew up homeless. I grew up in a car and I was homeless. And nobody would ever know that about me because I pushed and I got myself a degree and now I'm a partner in a firm, but that sits with me. And whenever I hear the word privilege, I get very upset because I do not feel privileged. And so we do have to figure out the phrasing that says it's not about what you went through, it's about where you are right now, but acknowledging what you went through because that informs you, right? And it's like we're not seeing the whole person. We're seeing that if you have that one identity that is considered privileged, then we don't acknowledge the rest of what you're going through. But it takes those real stories. And I agree with you. I hope in this next version of this work that we really are creating it with you in mind, and I'm excited to help companies figure that out. So the book, and so more series to come where as the chapters come out, we'll do a podcast around it and are excited and looking forward to people's feedback on what we have so far. So with that, Patrice, we have more work to do with more chapters, but I'm excited to be partnering with you on this.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be creating something with us in mind and with other people in mind. Looking forward to the feedback. We absolutely love feedback. Remember, feedback is love. We take feedback as caring about. And so we always ask for folks to provide that because there may be perspectives that we haven't even taken into account. And we want to be able to create this where folks are seeing themselves in the writing just as much as in the alignment of how the playbook is going to play out. So give us your feedback, give us your love in those spaces, and continue to love each other and to try to give each other grace.